Yeah, my name is Ethan. I work on Social Hiker with Jeff. You probably know is the head of it, and then this is TJ. This is our ambassador from Las Vegas. He kind of reps the whole Las Vegas region, and he's been really awesome. And so he's gonna do a presentation tonight on recovering from injuries, which is unfortunately a part of hiking. I know this summer I also had an injury. I hurt my ankle, and I'm only just getting back now, and it's been a bummer. So it's going to be yeah, it'll be good to kind of learn to avoid those, and if you can't avoid it, at least be safe if it happens to you. So yeah, I guess with that, I guess there's already decent amount of people in here, so let's TJ, I guess I'll turn it over to you. I know we have a slideshow, and so if people could just I think we were trying to get it set up to work, but when he starts sharing, if you can't see it, if you could just send a message or raise your hand or something, that'd be great. But yeah, without further ado, let's you're up, TJ.
Hey guys, thanks for stopping by, checking out this recovering from injury. It's going to be super short, but hopefully it's going to be so informative. The first thing that I'm going to go over through this whole process is failing to plan is planning to fail. And this is something that I really take to heart because I'm a planner. Sometimes I overplan. So these are some things, sorry, that I do just to kind of keep it super simple. But it's always on my agenda, always planning. So the first thing I always like to tell myself is it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when the injury is going to occur on trail. And this can be anything. So it can be something as simple as a blister. It could be something as a rolling an ankle, which is typical on these things. So it's one of those things that it's going to happen, no matter if it's a day hike, if it's a long distance through hike, a section hike. No matter what hike I've ever done, there's always been some kind of small little injury, and that it happens, right? We get caught up looking through our scenery, and we're just having fun. Next thing you know, you miss a step, you roll an ankle, and now you're trying to figure out what to do. The second part of this is think about this stuff to yourself. Ask yourself a question. Have you had joint pain or muscle injury in the past? And if this answer is yes, chances are there are a good chance that you might have a reoccurring injury again. I'll use myself as an example. I have a bad knee, left knee. It's always been there, always has. So I know at some point in time on any hike, I'm going to have muscle soreness. I'm going to have joint fatigue. I might even have some swelling. So I just know to have that mindset that I might have an issue during any of my hikes. And that can be anywhere from a 3-mile hike up to an 80-mile hike. I know I'm going to have some kind of issue that's going to come up where I have to just change my mindset and figure it out from there. The third thing I like to plan is studying your hiking route. And it doesn't matter if you've hiked it 10 times, 100 times, know your route and know your outdoor adventure itinerary. This is something that's key because as I explained into this whole recovery process, I had the mindset and I knew what I could and couldn't do and where my exit points were at. And that's probably the biggest thing. You don't want to get stuck in the wilderness or on your hike, your adventure, and be like, I don't know what to do, where to go. And the next thing you know, you're panicking and you're hitting the SOS button on there on your Garmin InReach or whatever mobile device you're using. So just keep that in mind, knowing what you're doing, knowing where your exits are in your itinerary, what it looks like, and you guys can kind of go from there. Fourth, what does your hiking first aid kit look like? Is it a very minimal kit? Are you only carrying a Band-Aid? Are you carrying Advil or some kind of aspirin? Are you keeping it simple? Or are you overpacked? How I hurt on this injury in this last hike, I kind of overpacked on my first aid kit. Usually it's pretty simple. I have Advil, some dental floss, Leukotape, KT tape, and that's about it. This one, I knew the amount of elevation that I was going to gain and lose. So I actually packed some other stuff that will go with it, but I overpacked on this trip because I knew that there was a good chance that I might be needing it. And let's see, here we go. Are you prepared to abandon your hike? Your itinerary, regardless if it's a solo trip or a group hike. So that's something that you kind of have to have in your mindset. I know some of you guys have been here either group with or you hike with a group of people, and some of you guys are soloists that are just want to go and outdoors and do adventures on your own, which is totally cool. But you have to be willing to make that decision. If you're in a group, or if this is something you've planned for a year, 2 years, you have to be willing to not risk anything, getting hurt or putting other people in jeopardy, and just make that decision that, hey, this isn't the year. I can do this another time. Your health and everyone's safety is probably the most important thing. And I've learned this a couple times now, just in my own personal experience. Be responsible in your decision making. That decision that you make isn't just going to affect you. It's also going to affect the people around you. So if you think of a group hiking scenario, if you try to push yourself and you become a liability, now you're putting that burden on the people that you're hiking with. On the other side is, if you have to get pulled out in the backcountry by National Park Service, think about that National Park Service worker. And that's something that I think about during this planning process. If I have to press that button, I know that there's no other way to get out of there, and that's going to be my only option. So make sure you're making that decision as much as responsible as you can, because it affects everyone. So those are some of the things that I do in the beginning for every hike. Is just always plan, because you never know when it's going to happen. It's just a matter of it's just, yeah, it's inevitable. Something's going to happen, from a blister to rolling an ankle to what I'm about to show you. So, all right. The next step is how it started, right? This is how we start all of our hikes. We're enjoying ourselves. There's my wife and I having fun, smiling. We love the outdoors. These miles are nothing. We're killing it. We're crushing it. And it's all about having fun. So the mindset and this, how it started, was amazing. So it's just remembering why you're out there. It's really simple to get caught up in everything that you are enjoying, because like I said, it can happen just in the middle of nowhere. Something can happen. Like I said, it can be a hot spot on your foot. It could be a knee injury. It could be anything. Might not even be you. It might be someone in your group, or someone that's not even in your group, that you might stumble upon that may be injured. So that's something that also happens. That, are you going to be that person that's going to be there to lend a hand and help a fellow hiker out? Or are you going to be, hey, we'll see you down the road type of thing? So I hope everything works out. And I'll kind of explain that how later on in the slide presentation. So now what everyone wants to see is the injury. That was my knee. Yes, that is a knee. There is a knee underneath there, believe it or not. So like I said, I know going into every single hike that I do, regardless if it's 3 miles, walking around the block, 60-mile JMT section hike, an 80-mile section hike. In this case, this happened to be the Rae Lakes Loop up in Kings Canyon National Forest. And this is what happened to me roughly on the first day, roughly 5 miles into the hike. Now, it didn't start off this swollen right away, but you have to realize it's going to happen. It's going to come. And for me, this is my reality in hiking. So I was smart enough to identify when the injury could be occurring. So for me, I know my symptoms. I know when my knee is starting to get a little tight, I'm starting to lose a little bit of mobility. For me, those are signs. I recognize those signs. I've been dealing with knee issues since I was in 6th grade. So I've, come accustomed to recognizing some of these signs. Other people, it can be something as simple as a blister. It can be, oh, I have a small pinch or you might feel a hot spot. It could be something little as that. Something just doesn't feel right. That can be a simple identifying symptom to make you want to stop and think for a second. So once you start recognizing something like this, and it could be some even a hunger pain, or it could be you're cramping, slow down your thought process is the next portion of this. Just slow it down. If you slow down your thought process, you're able to take a deep breath and think about, okay, what's going on right now? This isn't normal. So it can be anything, any simplest thing, as long as you slow down your thought process and think it through. Could it be something? Is it not something? Am I just psyching myself out? Which happens a lot of the times with myself also. So just really think about this as part of the injury process and how I was able to really slow down my thought process and evaluate where I was at. So at the 5-mile mark of this hike, it just happens to be all incline at this point. This is about 2 miles outside of a spot called Mist Falls. It wasn't really the point of no return, but I did know at this time with my knee issues, if I went back down the incline I just came up, I would be in bigger trouble than I would have just to continue to go on. So my mindset already was able to slow down my thought process, and I actually was able to evaluate the injury and the severeness of the injury. Now, while I've been on trail, I've had some of these symptoms, and some of these symptoms went away a mile later, and I just was like, oh, okay, that passes. Sometimes I've been on a hike. Back in 2018, I did a JMT section hike, and I had no knee issues the entire trip. On the very last day, we decided as we're walking down from, where was that coming from? Little Yosemite campground down to the valley floor. That's when my whole life changed. So you can have a perfect hike, but the last 2 miles or 3 miles can make a huge difference. And that's something that you just have to be able to grasp and understand. I did that same section of hike with my brother back in 2020, and the exact same thing. Flawless. We did about 20 miles more than back in 2018, and in the exact same section, but this time it started halfway down. So right when we got to the bridge, right before we got into the valley, that's when my knee started having issues. So it's a lot of these things. It's going to happen. It's going to be not consistent, but that's kind of where evaluating the injury allowed my mindset process to know where I was at the time during my injury, and that I need to continue to go forward, because going backwards at that time, I was going to do more damage to it than going up. So PMA, positive mental attitude. Easier said than done, right? So for me, for those that know me, if I get injured or something happens, like it can be a mosquito, and it will turn my whole life upside down. I think it's the end of the world. I get upset. Next thing you know, I'm like, I don't even know why I do this. This is, dumb. Who hikes for fun? And so I have to remind myself that positive mental attitude is the key. And if you surround yourself with a good group of hikers, they'll remind you also. They'll tell you, hey, it's okay. On this hike, I had my brother with me, my wife, my friend Kitty, and Hippie Mel, and everyone was cool, positive. And then I had my sister-in-law that also kept us all together. So we all had positive mental attitude. And even though I was starting to get down on myself, I started to push it a little bit faster than I wanted to. But at that time, I just knew that I had to stay positive and get it to the next section. So exit strategy. So when my knee got to this point here on the picture, I knew that my exit strategy, I only had one option. At that time, my option was to make it to the first night's camp, which happened to be 6 miles up the trail. And that was right before the water crossing. And I knew that my best option at that time was I needed to abandon this hike, and I needed to stay there at least for 2 days until my swelling of my knee went down a little bit. And the reason why I made that decision is because I studied my route that I was going. We were going clockwise. And so at this time, I want to be tough. I want to be the person that's not going to let everyone down. So I kept my mouth shut. I just kept plugging along. And about a mile, 2 miles before we got to our camp spot, I was the last one coming in. I made the decision. I was smart about it. I had 3 miles to think about what I was going to do and what my next decision was and what my exit strategy was. So before I just said, you know what, screw this, I'm done, out of here. I've had enough. I'm going back right now. I kept plugging along until I caught up with a group and I said, look, guys, and I'll never forget this. We were right outside of Lower Paradise Valley. I think we might have been at middle Paradise Valley at this time. And I just explained it to them. Look, it's a lot of up and down at that section. So I told everyone, I said, hey, I don't know if I can keep going. I know that I can make it to our happy, I guess it would have been Upper Paradise. But at this time, I was like, I don't know if I can do this hike. So this is what I'm willing to do. And so what I did was I explained to everyone like, hey, I'm sorry, but I can't go any further than this because I knew if I went past that point, that my decision would not be the smartest and safest decision, not just for the group, but if someone had to come bail me out, which was the last thing I wanted to do. So what I did is I kept it super simple. And I was just like, hey, it's one of those things when you know. And man, was I super bummed? Yeah. Was I upset? Yes, because we had planned this hike for 2 years and I knew I can crush the miles. Mileage wasn't a big deal. But at the end, it was like, man, my body was telling me like enough was enough. And this terrain, no joke, 52 miles. I know it sounds like it is a lot of mileage, but when you look at the hike, it's like, man, it's so beautiful, picturesque, but at the same time, it's just like you're so bummed because I felt like I let everyone down. Now it gets better. So after this, I made the decision. I said, let's just go to camp. And actually, my younger brother, he said, let's just get to camp and we'll figure it out from there. And then my wife, Amanda, she also said, yeah, let's not make any decisions now, but let's regroup and we'll talk about it when we get there. So I made the decision. I was like, all right, cool. We'll regroup. We could have had, a big powwow about it, but we just rest and stuff like that. So this was the biggest thing, was just being smart about your next decision. And that was the key. So how I recovered. So there's a lot of things that happens in between the injury. Now, I'll tell you a backstory. I wasn't the actual only one who got injured on this hike. On this hike, also about 3 miles before my knee issue happened, one of our friends that was with this, Kitty, he got heat stroke and it was fully exposed. And that's one thing that we didn't count on. We started a hike at 6:30 in the morning, and next thing you know, you're fully exposed. It's 95 degrees outside, and you just overheat carrying a 20-pound pack. And so that's what happened to Kitty. He overheated, and luckily we had enough electrolytes. We got him up and going, but it started to kind of a snowball effect after that time. The recovery process, everyone loves the recovery process. So this is what I'm going to really focus on, is how I recovered in the backcountry. Now, everyone has heard the term embrace the suck. So as you can tell, I embraced the suck. Was I happy in this picture? Absolutely not. Was I over it? I sure was. But I took as many breaks as possible, and I really embraced the suck because I felt like I was bringing everyone down. I'm used to being a strong hiker, and on this hike, at this point, I was all back of the bus. So I don't know if any of you guys ever hiked with a group and you kind of just get left behind and you're like, oh, great, this sucks. I feel like, everyone's waiting on me, and that's how I felt. So what I did is I just really embraced the suck. I embraced the pain. I just started counting miles. And that's one thing that I hate doing while I'm hiking, is I'm counting the miles, because if you're counting the miles, you're not paying attention to anything else. You're not enjoying the scenery, and then your mind gets all over the place. And so this was my process of the whole recovery process. So at this point right here, I really sat down and I thought about it. The first thing I thought about is like, man, do I really need National Park Service to come bail me out? And that's the first thing I thought of, because I have, the Garmin InReach. A lot of people use that one. And I thought about it. I was like, man, do I need them to come bail me out? And then I started thinking about it, and I was like, man, you know what? Here I am. I'm 7 miles into this thing. And do I really need to have someone come get me, even though it was 7 miles? Yeah, I didn't want to put that person at risk. And I just started, part of the slowing down process was know where I was at on the trail. I knew where we were going to stop. I knew how much water we had, and I knew my surroundings as far as what was I going to be able to do to really slow down my knee injury and how to slow down the swelling process. The biggest thing that I did was I hiked my own hike. Hike your hike. No matter what you do, hike your hike. I have some friends that I'll do a hike with, and they will blow me out of the water, and I'll see them like maybe an hour later as they're eating lunch, and I'm still struggling to get to them, and I hadn't taken a break. So, and I pushed myself too much. So you're going to have so many different levels of hikers on a regular hike without injuries, but on this case, like, you really truly have to hike your hike. Take your time, take more breaks more often, and that's what I did. This was the biggest part of my recovery process, was the breaks. I would literally count steps. I would go like, hey, I'm going to go to that next shade spot, and that would take a break. Even though I wasn't out of breath or anything, I just tried to give myself more rest time. I would sit down on a rock, try to elevate my leg, or I would straighten it up so I didn't get any cramping at that time. Just because I knew my knee, and I evaluated the process of what kind of injury I had. And I knew right away that this was an injury that if it got any worse, then I was going to have to rely on my little brother to carry me out. And being the older sibling, there was no way in Hades I was going to have my little brother pack me out. So I kept it simple. I took breaks, and I embraced the suck. The other thing you have to remember too, and part of this was it was more mental for me than it was physical, was remember why you were out there in the first place. I work in a super stressful work environment, a lot of pressure, and the whole purpose of this was to get a family hike out there, all of us together, and just really create that experience that you're looking for. It's being out in nature. I know some of you guys that are on here are nature lovers just like myself, and no matter what's going on in the outside world, as soon as you get out in the Mother Nature, it seems like everything goes away. You can get lost, you can have fun, you can meet new people, and that's the coolest thing, is having that experience. We did meet a couple cool people, but not like we've met in the past on trail. Laura, I know you're on here. Laura was one of the few people we've met on trail that I still keep in touch with over years from our JMT section hike back in 2018. And that's why you're out there. You're out there to have fun. You're finding that experience. You're just one with Mother Nature. And that was pretty cool that I had to remember that. And it's one of those things also. It's easier said than done, but that's the biggest thing. I'm huge into photography. So for me, that gave me perfect time to really stop and take pictures of everything. So when I was hiking my hike and they were waiting 10 minutes for me, I always blamed it. Oh yeah, I was taking photos. Like, it's, even though they knew I was hurt, but it's still my mental state that I used that to like get me back to why I was out there. Took tons of pictures, and it was well worth it. And this also allowed me to even slow down and find what resources were around me for that recovery process. Well, I made it to that 11 miles or that 12-mile mark that day. It was simple as oh, hey, this would make a cool video for, my Instagram story or whatever social media. So I would sit there like, oh, cool, a log. I'll sit down, I'll relax, shade. I was using shade for every time that I was counting that process of steps of, man, I'm just going to go 10 more steps because I can feel it coming on. I would use that and like I'd stop, sit down, look around and see if there's anything I could take a photo of. So that was pretty cool. That was super simple. And then when we finally did make it to our camp spot, this is what it was all about for me. I listened to my body. I took all the breaks I needed. I stayed hydrated and I used the first aid that I packed. So this is small examples. When I say I overpacked for this trip, like we overpacked for this trip. I knew I was going to have knee injuries. So we packed the instant cool packs, ice packs. We packed, if I remember correctly, I think we brought 8 of them. And because we knew that someone is going to have sore joints, my wife at this point was having back injury. My sister-in-law, she was having a little bit of back injuries, but she's tougher than all of us. So she's like, no, I don't need that. So that was kind of cool. Advil gel caps. I put the gel caps on here because I know that's part of my planning process and I know that's what works for me, works best for me. I used a muscle freeze, so you can use a biofreeze. And yes, I did take a full jar of the biofreeze, which was a lifesaver. And then also I did use a CBD recovery cream. So those were all packed in my first aid, and I used these in conjunction with the picture that you see here. So in this picture, this was me just sitting in my camp chair and my legs elevated, embracing the suck. At this time, everyone had left with the exception of my wife and sister-in-law, and everyone else in the group decided they wanted to go explore. This is our first camp. They went down hiking. They walked back, I guess, 2 miles, found a fishing hole, relaxed, took pictures. I knew that there was no way I was going to be able to make that. So I just listened to my body and I just calmed down and I just enjoyed the scenery. And it was crazy because this was probably the funnest part, was just listening to everything. I had running water. I was able to sit down in the water, soak my legs, soak my knee. And this was probably the fastest recovery on a serious injury that I've had on trail. The last time I had this similar injury was in 2018 and in 2020 on that JMT section hike. And I didn't recover for, I think it was 2 weeks later before the swelling went down. And it was almost to the point, my last hike with my brother, that I actually thought about getting my knee aspirated because the swelling wasn't going down fast enough. So I'm a firm believer in Mother Nature, using your resources and not overdoing it and being smart about it. The stubborn me would normally say, yeah, I'll go with you. I don't have to carry a pack. It's just my body weight. I can walk down because it's downhill, no problem. But that's what I didn't do. I actually thought it through. Didn't want to put anyone in jeopardy. And if anyone knows me, I'm pretty clumsy. I walk over things, I back things, run over things, walking backwards. It doesn't matter. I'm a klutz. I drop my trekking poles all over the place. So I really took this time to use my surroundings and just really take care of my body. Now, I didn't overdo it with the Advil. I really limited myself to how many I took. I probably took 2 a day, but I just I enjoyed myself. I embraced the suck, and that's what I typically do when I ever get injured while I'm on trail. I've had blisters before, and blisters for me are more of a pain than having a knee injury because with blisters for me, like they're so uncomfortable, but it's just like it's an inconvenience. Now I have to stop. I have to take my shoes off. I got to pull my socks off, and I don't wear regular socks. I wear the Injinji toe socks. So now it's even more of a pain in the rear. So, it's harder for me to stay positive in that situation compared to my knee. I knew it was going to happen. I just didn't know when. So as you guys are preparing, as you guys are recovering, the biggest thing I could say is just positive mental attitude and use the tools that you have with you. And that's what helped me the most. So I'm kind of a weight Nazi when it comes to hiking. So I've gone from, I started out with a 75-pound pack, then I went down to a 33-pound pack. Now I'm down to a sub 15 pack with everything that I need. On this trip, I overpacked and had about 20 pounds because we did carry extra first aid stuff because I had knee braces, we had a back brace, extra tape. So it's just be prepared. Plan for something to go wrong, even though it might not. And also with this picture here, you don't want to be that person that doesn't listen to your body and just figures out and that stubborn person, because we did run into a lady the next morning in our first camp spot who was hiking the JMT. She was 67 years old, retired nurse, had never through hiked, had done some small 5-mile, 10-mile hikes, and she got so dehydrated, turned around, made a wrong turn, hiked 50 miles in the wrong direction, and didn't eat a full meal in 12 days. And she ended up in our campsite. She was handed off to us. And being a retired nurse, she still didn't have the planning and the knowledge in the outdoors to figure out her surroundings and not recognize when she was having an injury. And that was really sad because she ended up staying with us the next day, and she did have to call the National Park Service. And that was kind of, it was a scary ordeal, but we got her help. And the one thing that, her actions could have been prevented if she had planned better. She had no support while she was on the trail. Her pack was overweighted for what her body was. And so with that happening, she failing to recognize that. Now, not only did she put herself in jeopardy, but now we had a park ranger that hiked 12 miles up one day in 95-degree weather, and he was carrying a 75-pound pack. He had EKG monitors, he had automatic external defibrillator in there, he had a oxygen tank. So now this poor guy, this park ranger, carrying a 75-pound pack, now had to figure out how he was going to get the 67-year-old lady down the mountain carrying her 33-pound pack and make it back to safety. And that was probably the hardest thing that I saw, because man, I could have been that person. I could have just said, hey, let me rest here for one day and I'll keep going. The next thing you know, we're going over Glen Pass and I can't get down. So then I didn't want to be that person. So but it was crazy to see those actions and the planning and our strategy that we've put in place work for myself and the safety of others, but how I could have made that mistake and push through and end up just like her. So just be smart about it. And this is part of the recovery process. It might not work for everybody. And I always tell that because I'm different. My brother has knee issues also, but my recovery process is going to be a lot different than his. He's a year and a half younger than I am. His knees aren't as bad as mine. And so he'll recover a lot faster than I will. So this is just kind of find out what works best for you. But for me, with my injury being as bad as it was, this is what really helped me out, was just listening to my body and then having a good group of hikers with me that really kept me grounded and positive, tons of laughs. And I think we were joking on this hike, but laughter really does cure a lot of things. And that whole trip, we just laughed. We stayed positive. I got made fun of a bunch, which is fine because everyone got a good laugh at it. So that's what really got me through, was just preparing, the planning of it, the whole aspect. And it allowed me, we actually stayed at this spot for 3 nights. So we stayed here 3 nights to give myself a little extra recovery time. The swelling did go down. And then what we decided to do, instead of trying to hike the 12 miles back down all in one day, we split it up. So part of the recovery process too was knowing how far I was going to be able to go downhill. So if you remember before, on the descents is where I really struggle with my knee issues. And so I knew this whole 12 miles back to Rose End where we started was going to be all downhill. And it wasn't just a simple gradual downhill. There's some certain sections, switchbacks that are exposed that had 18 to 20-inch granite drops. So I knew that there was no way I was going to be able to do this in one day. I knew we had to take baby steps. And so everyone was cool with it. They helped me out through this process. And so on the hike out, the hike out was super cool. And this is how we ended our hike. So this was the best part for me, was because coming down the same way I went up, you were able to see the cool stuff. So, the picture with me by myself solo and all these ferns, I was the last person coming through there. So I hiked my own hike, and I was in turtle mode. I was, slower than turtle mode. I was in sloth mode at this point. So it was cool. It was the best thing I ever did. It was the best decision I made to hike my own hike, but really embrace the suck. And if you look at the photograph to the right, the group of all four of us, I had my wife, myself, my brother, and my sister-in-law, Jamie. You could tell she has a mosquito net on her, covering her face, and she's covered head to toe. She got eaten alive by mosquitoes. So she had to embrace the suck. So she did get some swelling from that. She did have medicine to help with the swelling, but she also embraced the suck. And this was just us coming down, keeping it super simple. And this was about, being a group. And the hike out for me was one of the funnest parts, because I was really able to think about them personally and how they affected me during this hike and kept me positive throughout the whole time, but also allowed me the knowledge that you gain over the years of hiking and putting them into action. It really does help out. So the experience is the key. For me, it is actually listening to other people's stories, what works for them, trying new things, because you never know when you're going to have to rely on that knowledge that you've learned throughout the course of the years. I have friends that have had back issues and have switched their whole gear out. They've gotten a little bit lighter. And that's what I ended up doing back in 2018. I had a 33-pound pack, and that was super heavy for me compared to my friend Benny that I met on the trail that year. And I'm still not much lighter than that, but it's light enough for me. So that would be my ultralight, is 15 pounds. And that's my ultralight. And I'll never want to go lighter than that, because I know with that kit, it'll help me in any kind of process that I have, as far as my recovering, my injuries. I'll have all my necessities. Yeah, I'm overpacked on some first aid stuff, but that's all part of the experience. And that's what allowed me to get to this point here, which was I made it to the finish line. And that was the most important thing for me, was we made it as a group. I didn't make any dumb decisions. I didn't put anyone in jeopardy. And I think that was, for me, that was the easiest thing, because I was able to, I was willing to forfeit and give my permit to my wife, and I was going to stay at the first night camp while everyone else continued. And I know that's probably the dumbest thing. They always tell you not to separate from your group. You leave as a group, you come back as a group. But at that time, I knew that I was willing to forfeit that hike right away, because I didn't want to put myself in jeopardy, and I knew what my limits were, and I didn't want to put them in jeopardy. And I knew that place where I was going to be at was going to be fine. I would have seen them back on the trail. But if you're going to start off as a group, leave as a group, and without everyone here in this picture, I don't think I would have been able to do that. I'm sure if I was doing a solo hike on this trip and I got injured at the same time, I would have thrown my hands up. I would have gone into panic mode. Eventually I would have calmed down. But I think this was by far, this group of people that allowed me to make it down safely. They helped me recover. You can kind of see in this picture, my knees aren't that swollen. I ended up having an issue with secondary issue with my other knee. But yes, without these guys, it's the whole recovery process really allowed me to slow my thought process, and recover a lot faster just with being with a group of people and using all the tools that I had at my ability to just kind of check everything out. So yeah, that's kind of my recovery process. I don't know if you guys can still see that, but if anyone has any questions or anything else. Oh, got a question.
Yeah, so someone sent a question. Have you ever had to bail on a hike, and why?
Yeah, so this hike I actually bailed. This was a 52-mile hike, and we made it 12 miles. So for me, this was a really tough decision, like I said, because this was a 2-year planned hike, and so we were going to do this as a family. This was going to be our experience, and I bailed on it just because I knew that was the safest thing for me personally. That was the right call to make. Luckily, I had a group of hikers with me that understood, and they were able to recognize what their injuries were. And we did later to come to find out, we had our friend Hippie Mel. She was having back and knee issues. My sister-in-law, she's tougher than all of us, and she was having issues, but they all agreed that, yep, hey, we probably should be smart about this, and we all bailed on this hike just due to injuries and just listening to your body.
All right, we got another one. At what point do you know it was time to turn around and bail rather than push through the pain?
On this hike here, the biggest one was I was 7 miles in, and at the 7-mile mark, I'll tell. Actually, I'm gonna be honest with you guys. I misjudged the mileage of this hike to our first night camp. So I went off of 2 different mileage charts, which weren't the correct mileage chart that was actually posted. So in my mind, I only had an 8-mile day. So at mile 7, when we'd just gotten up to it was lower Paradise Valley, I looked at my wife and we were walking uphill, and I told her, I was like, my knees can't handle any of this. I'm done. I can't do this. And so at that point, at mile 7, I said, yeah, I'm just going to tell everyone once we get to camp, I'm done. My knees can't handle this. You guys can take my permit, and I'll stay here, and I'll meet you guys down at the junction. Little did we know, at that time, we actually had to get to mile 12. And so the running joke of that was 2 miles left, 2 miles left. So we started counting miles. And so everyone started getting, upset. Like, I thought you said it was 2 miles, like 4 miles ago. So, but yeah, so at that time at mile marker 7, I knew that I was having a problem and I couldn't go any further. So it was either push to make it back down. I knew I was going to do more damage on my knee that time. And I knew I had to get off my knee and get to the first spot just so I can start recovering on our first night camp at Upper Paradise. That was my only option at that time. I knew there was running water. I knew I was going to be able to soak my knee and just kind of recover. And at that time, I knew I had 4 more days to make it back down. So it was safer for me to push through. And recover there to get it to reduce the swelling enough to where I was able to make it out 2 days instead of 1. Laura said, were you the only one in the group that did the trail research? No, actually, my wife, Amanda, did a lot of research also with me. Everyone else in the group, Micah, Mel, they did research. My brother and his wife Jamie, they did the research, but I don't know if they did the research to the extent as me. I know where my bailing points were, I would recommend everyone to study the trail and their exit options prior to the hike. That's I think that has to be the most important thing, right? Because I mean, knowledge is key, and my wife had knowledge that I didn't have. She knew the exact mileage. I did know all the exit points. I knew if I can go to this point here, my only exit point was past Glen Pass, and so it was straight down. So we all had some knowledge, and I think the knowledge that we had between all three pairs all together, we were able to make the smart decisions. That's what really helped us out. And she also said exit options prior to the hike. Absolutely. You have to know those. You have to know your exit strategy. You have to know where your points of exit are. I'll use my 2018 hike. I got sick going up to Thousand Islands. And I told my wife, I made it there and I just sat on a rock. I was like, I can't do this. Like, I'm done. I started getting altitude sickness. I'm sure I was probably dehydrated also. But I knew at that point there weren't any options for me. I knew that I either had to make it to Tuolumne, which was I had to go over Donahue Pass, and then that was it. There were no exit points from that point for me at Thousand Island. I could have gone back and done 20 miles down back to Reds Meadows, but at that point it's always been easier for me to go up than it is down, just because of my knee issues. So and that time also, with my wife and her being calm and positive, she was able to sit me down, calm me down. I got some electrolytes in me, and really got through that. I woke up the next day and had my trail legs, and I was ready to rock and roll.
All right. Leslie asked, favorite or odd first aid item that I might not think of.
Favorite
or odd?
Or odd. My favorite is I would have to say the CBD cream. That's my most favorite, because you can use that. It works on backs, knees, joints, muscles. And the most odd, man, that's a great question. I don't know if there is an odd first aid item, because I've heard of pretty much everything. I've heard people bringing toothpicks as a needle instead of to pop blisters, or running dental floss with a toothpick through there to kind of keep the skin on there. But I mean, I guess whatever works for you. What could be odd to you might be normal to me. Another favorite of mine is KT tape. I don't know if anyone has experience with the KT tape, but you can also double it up as Leuco tape, which we've had to use before. Back in 2018, we had a friend with us, and she got a major blister a half mile into the hike, and her trail name became Hamburger Feet, because she finished the hike 62 miles in flip-flops. So it was, but that without the KT tape, she would have had nothing. And so that just happened to be, that's another one of my favorites. It's good for joints, blood flow, and you can use it for blister repair also.
Yeah, I never thought to do those instant ice packs. I had never thought to bring that. I think that's brilliant. Like, I'll definitely bring that on my next backpacking trip.
It's one of those things. That's my wife preparing, right? So I'm always like, no, I just need a knee brace, or no, I'm tougher than that. And she was like, oh, I'm gonna bring them, and they weren't that heavy. As much as I always complain about weight for myself, she's like, no, I'll carry them. Stop being a baby. We're going to use these. And sure enough, she was right, like she always is. And I ended up using them. So I think she used one too on her back, so it kind of worked out for everybody.
Yeah, well, yeah. And DJ, thank you so much for presenting. It was really great to hear about your trip, and I'm glad that you're able to make it out and help someone else in the process too. So that's fantastic. And then, yeah, thanks everybody for coming.